Today, we are strapping in for what might be one of the most, well, intellectually rigorous and frankly physically fascinating deep dives we've done.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're stepping away from pure theory, and
Yeah.
looking directly at a single building in Sierra Leone, of all places.
hmm
And this building, it aims to be a working model for, well, an entirely new kind of society.
That's a great way to put it. We really dove deep into the source material for this one, specifically this incredibly dense PDF, the Koya Dominion Kenemagorian.pdf.
Right.
And what we found wasn't just, a research paper or some architectural plans. It's more like a living manifesto.
A manifesto built out of concrete and laterite.
Pretty much. The ambition here is just huge. They're trying to weave together deep theology, radical post-colonial politics, economics, and really practical hands-on construction all in one place.
Okay, so let's try and unpack that. Our mission today really is to give you, our listener, a kind of shortcut through this incredibly complex stuff.
It's dense, very dense.
Yeah. We need to cut through some pretty heavy jargon, I think, and really get a grip on the ideas behind this building. We're focusing on the Second House Manifesto and this framework they call DT.
Right, DT squared. And the building itself, the Kenemagorian Mansion. But you really have to forget any typical idea of a mansion. This isn't about luxury.
No swimming pools, then.
Definitely not. In their own words, it's a covenantal hyperstructure
Yeah.
and a prometopian prototype.
Big words. Covenantal hyperstructure. Prometopian prototype. What does that mean in practice?
It means it's designed to be a living thing, a self-updating organism that's political, spiritual, sacred, all at once. It's supposed to be the theory, made real.
Embodied, theory made flesh, or maybe theory made laterite. And self-updating, that's key, isn't it? It's not static.
Not at all. That's a huge break from how we usually think about architecture.
Yeah, so this deep dive is really about understanding a project that's proposing a fundamentally different way to think about housing, yes, but also community, maybe even consciousness.
Exactly. It touches everything.
Right, so let's start at the beginning, the context.
Yeah.
The sources really stress this point. This isn't some theory cooked up in a university lab somewhere comfortable.
No, absolutely not. And that's crucial. This whole thing comes out of a postdoctoral fellowship by Benoit Nouni Lapierre.
Okay.
But it wasn't written about the mansion from afar. It emerged from it, from the lived laboratory of the Kenemagorian Mansion, right there in Kenema, Sierra Leone.
A lived laboratory.
Yeah, so the theory is constantly being tested by the reality on the ground, in the heat, with the local materials. If the theory doesn't work there, it doesn't work, period.
That really does change the stakes, doesn't it? It's philosophy being beta tested in real time with actual physical results.
And the main goal, they say, is to develop this transdisciplinary framework for rethinking what post-coloniality even means.
Okay, transdisciplinary. What does that look like when you're mixing theology and, cement mixers?
Well, it means they're tearing down the usual academic walls, those divisions between subjects. They see those as often being colonial legacies themselves. Ah, okay. So to really rethink things after colonialism, they argue you have to bring everything together at the same time. Family life, religious belief, how you build things, even the language you use. It's about building a unified system.
That makes sense. A system that works locally but maybe has wider relevance too?
That's the hope. And the result, the model they're aiming for, sounds like a bit of a paradox. It's described as low technology but high dynamic.
Low tech, high dynamic. Okay, explain that.
Well, the low tech part refers to using local, readily available stuff like laterite, that red earth, and zinc sheets, simple materials, not relying on complex global supply chains.
Got it. Minimizing dependency.
Exactly. But the high dynamic part, that's about the constant adaptation, the feedback loops, the way relationships shift within the house and between the people living there, which actually involves some AI we'll get to.
AI in a laterite house. Okay, intriguing.
Yeah. But the overall goal is this Afro-optimist futurity, a kind of grounded, practical optimism rooted in the African context, using local stuff, local knowledge, but with this intense intellectual drive behind it. Operationalizing hope, basically.
Operationalizing hope. I like that. So how does the underlying theory make this happen, this DTT, the double transverse transjective quadratic model theory? It sounds intimidating.
It does, yeah. Let's maybe ignore the math part for a second and focus on the method. They call it empirical triangulation.
Triangulation.
Think of 3 points they're trying to connect. Point 1, theological phenomenology studying religious experience. Point 2, Architectural practice, the actual building.
Yeah.
Point 3, sociolinguistic invention, creating new words, new ethical terms for the community.
Right. Experience, building, language.
And DT is the framework, the engine, that tries to measure the strength of the connections between these 3 points. It's trying to see if commitment, theology can be made solid in architecture and communicated through language. Can belief be tested against bricks?
Testing belief against brick and mortar.
Okay.
That makes it clear.
Yeah.
And you mentioned it displaces something. Auto-anthropo something.
Auto-anthropocentrism. Yeah, this is a really key philosophical move, especially coming out of colonialism.
Whichever.
Basically, the idea that the individual self, or maybe humanity cut off from everything else, is the center of everything, the measure of all value. It's kind of the bedrock of Western individualism.
Okay.
D2 says no. Reality isn't made by separate individuals. It's made by the relationships between things, between people and the environment, people and the divine.
So it's all about connection.
Exactly.
Oh.
Transjective reciprocity. Existence is defined by that flow across boundaries. The self only really exists in active relationship with everything else.
That's a big shift in thinking. It requires you to really rethink your place in the world.
Totally. And this focus on relationships leads straight to what they call the Kenemagorian synthesis.
The synthesis. Right.
Right.
Why does the theory insist that rebuilding after colonialism has to happen across all these levels, ontological, technical, effective, all at once?
Because, according to this source, that's where past efforts failed. They were fragmented.
How so?
Well, you couldn't just import, say, a political system without dealing with the local culture's understanding of reality, its ontology. And you couldn't just build infrastructure without thinking about the spiritual commitment needed to actually maintain it.
Right. Things fall apart if they aren't connected.
Precisely. Separation just leads back to abstraction, and abstraction, they argue, was the tool of the colonizers. So the synthesis insists knowledge isn't just described, it has to be built.
Build knowledge.
Yeah. If the DT theory doesn't result in a real, working, self-sustaining house in Kenema, then the theory itself is flawed. Or incomplete, the house has to prove the philosophy works.
That's a perfect transition. If the house has to prove the philosophy, let's look at the document that lays out its purpose, the Second House Manifesto. This is where the building itself becomes philosophy.
Exactly. The manifesto basically says the house is the physical proof, the empirical substrate of what they call non-auto anthropology. It's the living embodiment of rejecting that isolated, abstract self. It's a living palimpsest.
Palimpsest, like an old manuscript scraped clean and written over?
Sort of, yeah. We'll get more into that. But first, let's focus on the construction itself, because this is where theory gets, covered in sweat and dust.
Right. It says it was built through manual covenant, local geomaterial wisdom, and familial devotion, and that the construction refutes abstraction.
Yeah, refutes abstraction. What they mean is every decision is immediate, physical, ethical. You can't just order something online or rely on abstract market prices. You're using what's there.
The local laterite, the zinc.
Right. And the act of building itself is called exegesis, like interpreting a sacred text. But here, you're interpreting your faith and your environment through the act of building.
So mixing the cement is interpretation.
In a way, yes. They even call the cement a theology of contact. The physical connection to the material is sacred. The strength of the cement has to reflect the strength of the community's spiritual bond.
Wow. So if the cement mix is bad, it's literally a spiritual failing.
That seems to be the implication. It's immediate, high-stakes application of the theory. Now, about that central idea, palimpsestes decentralized, the living palimpsest.
Right. It replaces architectural determinism.
Meaning the idea that the building dictates how life happens within it.
With iterative inscription logic. Okay, what's that?
It means the house is constantly being rewritten, inscribed by experience. Life dictates the structure, not the other way around.
So the blueprints are just suggestions.
Pretty much starting points. They expect to constantly adjust things based on how the house performs, how the environment changes, how the community lives in it. It's crucial for being self-sufficient off-grid. If something isn't working, you have to be able to change it yourself.
Now, this is the part that really got me. You mentioned AI earlier. The source says 3 things merge into a single autogrammatic data set: human perception, environmental signals, and AI correction. How does AI fit into a house built with mud bricks and prayer?
It's not what you might think. The AI isn't like driving robot builders.
Okay, good.
It's a sophisticated feedback system. It's likely monitoring things the humans can't easily track: 247 tiny shifts in the structure, thermal changes, humidity levels affecting the laterite, maybe the efficiency of the solar panels.
So it gathers data.
Right. It processes that data, compares it to the original goals of the covenant, and flags any deviations.
Like, hey, this south wall's getting way too hot in the afternoons.
Exactly like that. And the correction isn't automated. The AI relays that information back to the people living there. It tells them, there's an issue here, you need to intervene.
So the humans still do the fixing.
Yes, manually. And remember, they call repair repentance. So the AI flags a problem, and the community responds through manual work, which is also a spiritual act. The house literally writes itself through feedback.
Its ontology self-updates through habitation.
Exactly. Living there isn't passive. You're actively participating in the design, constantly.
This intense focus on the practical, the empirical, leads to their economic and ethical ideas. Let's start with kinetic actualism.
Right. This is basically their theory of beauty. Beauty equals co-functionality. Meaning something is beautiful because it works perfectly within its context, the Kenema heat, the community's needs, the covenant. It's not about just looking nice. If a design choice looks pretty but makes the house inefficient or harder to maintain, it's considered ugly, flawed, corrupt even.
So every detail is both data and devotion.
Precisely, which connects to the next idea, semantic materialism.
Semantic materialism, material speaking.
Yeah, the conviction that the physical stuff, the matter itself, communicates through its behavior. If the zinc roof starts to rust unexpectedly, the zinc is telling you something.
Like what?
Maybe a failure in maintenance, not enough devotion? Or maybe a flaw in the original design, bad data? The materials aren't just passive objects. They're participants, signaling their condition. And the community has a moral duty to listen and respond.
Okay. And tying the work, the labor, into this is Stamenorg continuity.
Stamenorg, stamina and organism fuse together. It collapses labor, spirituality, and design into one continuous thing.
How so?
Because the house is seen as this perpetually updating organism, the physical effort, the stamina needed to build it and keep fixing it is part of its very being. The work is never really done. It's ongoing devotion.
Which leads perfectly to the sacred side of the work, sacramental competence.
Yeah, this is the ethical guide for living there.
Right.
The hands-on work is spiritual practice. To build is worship. To repair is repent. To simply live there and maintain it is to sustain revelation.
Sustain revelation.
And getting good at the work, mastering the skill of plastering the laterite just right, or fixing the solar setup through repetition that's seen as a form of spiritual development, a sacramental anthropology. Sharpening your skills sharpens your soul.
Okay, that's a lot of heavy philosophy packed into one building. Let's get really grounded now in Section 3, the kenetopic actuality. Enough abstraction. What does this place actually look like, feel like, in the Kenema heat?
Right. It's described as the first deterritorialized sacrarium of this whole DTS system, the first physical proof. And it's substantial. We're talking 3,400 square feet.
That's a decent size.
Yeah, and the walls are 14 feet high, built entirely by hand.
14 feet, wow. Why so high?
Multiple reasons, seems like. Functionally, that height gives you a lot of thermal mass, helps keep the inside cooler, provides shade crucial for their cooling system, the kinetic aerology.
Okay, practical.
But it's also symbolic. That height represents ultra-vertical faith. It's described as a kind of symbolic fortress for prayerful concentration. Wall off the outside world, so the covenant, the internal spiritual life, can really grow strong within.
A barrier for focus.
Exactly. And the materials are listed simply as laterite, zinc, prayer, and sweat. It exists, they insist, not as a metaphor, but as kenetopic actuality. The theory and the flesh, proven right there in the red earth.
Let's talk about the politics built into the structure itself.
Yeah.
Decentral immanence and autonomy. The bricks and walls as active agents.
Yeah, this is where it gets really revolutionary, architecturally speaking. Every brick is an epistemic syllable. Every wall, a paragraph written against colonial geometry.
Against colonial geometry.
Meaning the straight lines, the rigid grids, the imported styles of colonial buildings that ignored local conditions and knowledge. This house, with its potentially non-rigid forms and local materials, is actively rejecting that legacy.
And the most obvious statement is the infrastructure, right? It's off-grid.
Totally off-grid, solar panels for power, rainwater harvesting for water. And this autonomy, they claim, is the proof that sacred infrastructure can emancipate itself.
Emancipate itself from what?
From big capital, from the state, from dependence on foreign aid or national grids. And it can do that, they argue, without falling into chaos.
And how does it materially do that, besides the solar panels?
Well, it relies on that kind of material proletiosis we'll dig into more soon, basically, valuing human stamina and local materials over imported tech and money. Its ongoing working existence is the argument. It shows you can have utility and sacredness that's self-contained, self-governed. It doesn't need outside approval.
Okay, so stepping inside now. How does that DT theory, ultra, extra, meta, intra, map onto the actual layout? The spatial syntax, we mentioned ultra, the high walls for faith. What about the others?
Right, the space is supposedly carefully arranged to manage relationships. Intra is the core, the deepest part, for familial intimacy, the private heart of the covenant.
Okay, the family zone.
Then extra is about social extension. Think verandas, courtyards, common areas, places designed for engaging with the wider community, for hospitality.
So you move from private intra to communal extra. Where does meta fit?
Meta is about reflection. Proportions, thresholds, maybe specific rooms or corners for study, for contemplation. It's where the theory meets the practice, where they reflect on how things are working, update their thinking.
The thinking space.
Yeah, so the layout kind of guides you through these modes. Retreat for concentration, ultra. Reflect, meta. Engage, extra. Find intimacy, intra.
And even the air is part of this system.
Yeah.
Kinetic aerology.
Yes. This is where that local wisdom really comes in. It's about how the air moves through the building. Breezeways, ventilation, thermal management, but engineered through intuition, observation, traditional techniques, not just complex blueprints. Though the AI feedback probably helps fine-tune it.
So using the building itself, the high ceilings, the laterites, thermal mass, deep eaves to manage the heat.
Exactly. Working with the climate, not just fighting it with air conditioning. The source says the 3,400 square feet breathe. They metabolize the weather into theology.
Metabolizing weather into theology, that's quite a phrase. Turning the challenging heat into part of the sacred function.
That's the idea.
Okay, so we have this breathing, thinking, maybe even repenting house. It must have a pretty unique way of operating internally. What about leadership? The relational field theory of the domestic.
Right. It basically rejects top-down hierarchy. Instead, they talk about oscillatory synchrony.
Oscillatory synchrony. Sounds musical.
It kind of is. Think of leadership spreading out, diffusing among everyone. Communication happens through resonance, like musicians playing together, adjusting to each other instinctively, rather than someone giving orders.
So the group tunes into the needs of the house, the covenant, rather than following one leader.
That seems to be the model, prioritizing the system's health over individual desires.
And living this way, participating in the building and the community, is meant to change people fundamentally. They call it Afro-flat metanoia.
Yeah, another dense term, Afro-flat metanoia. It describes how consciousness gets recoded through this hands-on material participation. The idea seems to be that by doing the physical work, mixing the cement, hauling the water, fixing the walls based on the feedback, your individualistic, maybe more abstracted way of thinking gets flattened, integrated into the collective relational whole. It's like a purification process through labor and focus.
That sounds incredibly demanding. Mentally, spiritually, how does the house or the system handle the emotional side of all this?
Through what they call an emotional ecology, the source says every wall records its own sanctification.
Records it.
Meaning the effort, the joy, maybe the struggles that went into building and maintaining it are somehow inscribed in the material itself. The house is meant to translate energy into care and find equilibrium in shared joy.
And it breathes humidity as pneuma.
Right. Takes the oppressive tropical humidity and reframes it as pneuma, spiritual breath, turning an environmental challenge into a source of spiritual endurance.
Okay, let's shift fully to the economics. Kenematerial prolethiosis. Co-lethiosis, a proletaria plus apotheosis, raising up the worker.
Exactly, that's the economic base. Elevating manual labor, the work done with local Kenema materials, into a form of liturgy, sacred work.
So value comes from the work itself, not from global markets.
Precisely. It's an economy driven by intention and physical endurance, designed to cut ties with external market dependency. Hands replace machines, intention replaces funding, endurance replaces surveillance. The laterite isn't valuable because of some commodity price. It's valuable because of the focused human energy, the stamina, needed to shape it into this sacred structure.
And the philosophy behind this work is ancestral syndicalism. Syndicalism usually means worker control, right?
Yeah, worker control of production. But here it's ancestral drawing on local wisdom, materials, relationships, and it's explicitly linked to the late theorist Mark Fisher.
Mark Fisher, interesting connection.
Yeah, they describe it as a left Mark Fisher recovery of utopia through community self-assembly. taking Fisher's ideas about accelerating towards a post-capitalist future, but grounding it firmly in community action, building it yourself without the destructive parts of capitalism.
Which makes the mansion the Prometopian prototype. How is this Afro-optimist accelerationism different from the usual kind of accelerationism that often seems tied to tech and disruption?
The key difference is extraction. Standard acceleration often relies on extracting resources, capital, labor from somewhere else, usually causing displacement and environmental harm.
Right. Growth often means someone somewhere else pays the price.
Exactly. This Prometopian model insists on acceleration without extraction, progress without displacement. The goal is to advance self-sufficiency, relationships, spiritual depth, using only what's available locally through internal effort. It literally builds its progress. It doesn't just brand it or extract it.
Building, not branding. That leads to the last big idea, philosophical deterritorialization.
Deterritorialization, pulling meaning and value away from dominant centers, London, Paris, New York, wherever, and rooting it firmly in local sovereignty, right there in Kenema.
So the success of the house doesn't depend on validation from outside.
Not at all. Its value system is internal to the covenant and the place.
And being off-grid is a core part of that statement.
Absolutely. It's a physical critique of techno-surveillance, of being constantly measured and tracked by external systems. Here, visibility is replaced by presence, measurement by witness. You don't measure its success by GDP numbers. You witness its success by its functioning presence, by the life within it.
A geotheological node, transmitting humility through concrete.
Yeah, and when rain hits the zinc roof, that sound isn't just noise, it's interpreted as preaching. The environment speaks.
We talked about it being always under construction. An open equation, perennial kenomorphosis.
Perennial kenomorphosis. Constant change, constant adaptation. It's designed to be forever open to additions, fixes, even repentance in physical form. If they mess up ethically or practically, the house allows for that mistake to be corrected, overwritten.
Making it the anti-monument.
Exactly. Not static, not trying to impose one perfect, finished story. It's living, sweating, evolving.
So deterritorialization isn't about escaping, it's about
Rooted expansion. Taking radical ideas, maybe even from thinkers like Fisher, but planting them firmly in that specific place, that red earth. The ultimate proof, they say, isn't reading the theory, it's walking inside, crossing from philosophy into fellowship, from theory into temperature.
experiencing it.
Yeah. It demonstrates, or aims to demonstrate, that you can build sacredness by hand and that maybe the future they envision already exists. Right there. Deterritorialized, relational, and alive. Hashtag outro.
Wow. Okay, we have covered an incredible amount of ground, all centered on this one 3,400 square foot building in Sierra Leone.
That's a lot to take in.
Definitely. So the key things for you, the listener, to maybe hold on to, that fusion of spirit and material, the idea of architecture as a living, self-updating thing, that palimpsesti's decentralized idea, and this really different economic model, kinematerial proletheosis, driven by labor as liturgy.
And I think for anyone interested in development architecture, maybe even community building, this project, regardless of whether you agree with every single point, offers a really provocative model.
How so?
It shows one way, at least, to think about the sacred, the ethical, made tangible, made empirical through things like DTT, as a potentially viable, definitely non-extractive way to approach development in the 21st century. It's a philosophy you're meant to live and test, not just read about.
Right, a philosophy to be inherited through practice. We've seen how this house, zinc, laterite, prayer, sweat, tries to decentralize everything, economics, metaphysics, proving maybe that hope can be infrastructural.
That a building can be a manifesto.
Exactly.
And that leaves us maybe with a final question for you to think about. The Kenemagorian Mansion tried to blend traditional materials with really radical philosophy, using this idea of sacramental competence where labor becomes worship, if theory can become temperature, if a philosophy can literally be built. What abstract idea in your own world, maybe it's about justice or sustainability or community connection, could you imagine being built? Tangibly constructed through shared effort, through devotion, what would your material covenant look like?
Something to build on. Definitely something to think about. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.